Welcome to the Book of TeaZy, Volume 2, Book 1. Lil Chris in the Time Machine.
Little Chris was known as the most ruthless troublemaker in town. With a scar over his left eye and a permanent scowl etched on his face, he had built a reputation for being brutal to anyone who crossed his path. Fists always ready, pockets full of stolen goods, and an unyielding arrogance made him a menace. One morning, the ring of his telephone shattered the silence of his dingy apartment. "Chris, it's time to pay up," growled a voice on the other end. "You got until sundown, or today's your last day on Earth." The voice belonged to Zoracle, a feared and mysterious crime lord. His demands were never to be taken lightly. Chris slammed the phone down, cursing under his breath. He needed to come up with a large sum of money fast, and he had no idea where to start. As he paced the room, rain began to pour outside, hammering against the window with an almost taunting rhythm. Pulling on his coat and hat, Chris ventured out into the storm. The streets were nearly deserted, the downpour driving most people indoors. As he walked, he noticed a car pulled over to the side of the road, hazard lights flashing. An idea sparked in his mind. With a grim smile, he approached the car, drawing his gun. Inside, a young kid no older than Chris himself was struggling to keep dry, his guitar strapped to his back. Chris wasted no time. He yanked the door open, pointed the gun, and barked out, "Now!" The kid, eyes wide with fear, scrambled out into the rain, clutching his guitar as he stumbled to his feet. Chris jumped into the driver's seat and sped off, leaving the bewildered boy behind in the downpour. The car was unlike any Chris had seen before. It was filled with an array of lights and buttons that blinked and glowed in a confusing dance. Ignoring the strange dashboard, Chris drove straight to Zoracle's compound, a heavily guarded mansion on the outskirts of town. At the gates, his car was inspected before he was allowed inside. The guards eyed him warily, but Chris's reputation preceded him, and they let him through after a quick search. He was escorted into the grand hall where Zoracle awaited. "Boss, I got you a car," Chris announced, trying to mask the nervousness in his voice. "Hope it's enough." Zoracle, a tall man with a presence that demanded respect and fear, studied Chris for a moment before speaking. "Leave the car here. You're lucky I'm feeling generous today." Chris nodded and turned to leave, but Zoracle's voice stopped him. "Wait, I have a job for you." Chris turned back, heart pounding. Zoracle continued, "That car you brought me is special. It's a time machine. I need you to take it to the year 3297. There, you'll meet a Dr. Rico. He'll know what to do with it. Once that's done, return the car to the boy you stole it from. Just park it near him and get out. It will find its way back to him." Chris's mind reeled. A time machine? But he knew better than to question Zoracle. He simply nodded and followed Zoracle's men back to the car. Once inside, Zoracle's men showed Chris how to operate the time machine. With the year 3297 set on the glowing panel, Chris took a deep breath and pressed the button. The car shuddered, and with a flash of light, the world around him changed. Chris found himself in a dazzling city of the future. Towering skyscrapers reached into the sky, and strange vehicles flew through the air. He drove to the address Zoracle had given him, arriving at a sleek building where Dr. Rico, a scientist with a sharp gaze, awaited. After a brief exchange, Dr. Rico inspected the car, nodding in approval. "This will do nicely. Now return it as instructed." Chris drove back to the spot where he had first stolen the car. It was still pouring rain, just as it had been earlier that day. He parked the car and got out, running to a nearby alley to watch what would happen next. He followed the car to a nearby venue. The young boy he had robbed earlier appeared, drenched but determined. Running out of the back door, the boy approached another figure in the shadows, handing something to the man, though Chris couldn't make out what it was. The car then lifted off the ground and glided over to the boy, as if drawn by an invisible force. Chris watched, breathless, as the boy climbed back into the car. The vehicle seemed to shimmer, then vanished in a flash of light. The last thing Chris saw before it disappeared was the boy's face, a look of resolution in his eyes. The rain continued to pour, and Chris stood in the alley, soaked and shivering. He felt a strange sense of relief wash over him. For the first time in his life, he had done something that might make a difference, even if he didn't fully understand it. And as he walked away from the alley, he knew he would never forget the boy with the guitar, and the car that traveled through time.
Book 2, Dr. Rico Meets the Knock Knock Clan.
Dr. Rico stood in the sprawling lab of his high-tech facility, gazing at the gleaming time machine he had successfully built from the blueprints Oracle, the enigmatic oracle of time, had given him. It was a sleek, futuristic marvel, its polished surfaces reflecting the lab's fluorescent lights. The operating system was so advanced it could revolutionize various fields, but Rico decided to leave those possibilities to his team of brilliant scientists. His focus was on one goal: traveling to the year 3280 to pioneer semen power, a groundbreaking technology sure to make him rich beyond his wildest dreams. With everything ready, Rico carefully climbed into the time machine, setting the controls for 3280. But as he reached to adjust the power settings, his elbow knocked over a vial of chemicals on the console. The liquid hissed and bubbled, short-circuiting the delicate electronics. Alarms blared, lights flashed, and before Rico could react, the machine whirred to life, sending him hurtling through the fabric of time. When the violent spinning stopped, Rico found himself in a desolate, ancient landscape of red canyons and dry riverbeds. Dazed and disoriented, he clambered out of the machine, taking in his surroundings. It was clear he was far from the future he had aimed for. After hours of wandering through the canyons, Rico stumbled upon a tribe of indigenous people. They greeted him with a mix of curiosity and caution. Their leader, a tall man adorned with intricate feathers, stepped forward and introduced himself as Chief TeaZy. Alongside him were Miggy the man, Jorge the boar, Caesar the fish, Eddie V the elder, and Nathan the weapons specialist. Rico explained his predicament, showing them the damaged time machine and expressing his desperate need to fix it to return home. The tribe, intrigued by Rico's strange appearance and advanced technology, listened intently. They proposed a deal: if Rico could share his knowledge of weapon technology, they would provide him with the gold he needed to repair the machine's circuits. With no other options, Rico agreed. Over the next several days, he worked with Nathan and the others, teaching them about various weapon designs. In exchange, the tribe gathered and smelted gold, presenting it to Rico once they had enough. Rico set to work, painstakingly integrating the gold into the time machine circuits. Finally, the repairs were complete. He booted up the machine, its lights flickering back to life. The tribe gathered around, watching in awe. Rico hesitated, then pressed the ignition. A deafening boom echoed through the canyon, and a blinding flash of light engulfed the area. When the light faded, Rico found himself alone, in his mansion, the time machine sparking and sputtering. The once proud machine now looked like a twisted wreck. Disoriented, Rico realized the catastrophic malfunction had transported him once more. Meanwhile, in different eras, Chief TeaZy awoke in the year 1000 AD, in what appeared to be a garden of some sort in the middle of tall structures. He looked around, bewildered by the new world he now found himself in. Caesar the fish found himself in 1799, amidst the turmoil of pre-industrial revolution society, struggling to make sense of his new reality. Back in the ancient canyons, Miggy the man, Jorge the boar, Eddie V the elder, and Nathan the weapons specialist stood in stunned silence. Their leader and friend had vanished before their eyes, and the strange man who had promised to fix the broken machine was gone as well. Fear and confusion gripped them as they tried to understand the strange events that had unfolded. Chief TeaZy and Caesar the fish each stared at their surroundings, trying to comprehend their new realities. Despite the unexpected jump, they felt a glimmer of hope as they surveyed the advanced world. The adventure had not ended as planned, but they were determined to make the best of the situation and find a way back home.
Book 3: The Chief, the King, the Sheriff, and the Fish.
In a medieval castle courtyard, a sudden swirl of light and energy erupted, forming a portal that shimmered with an otherworldly glow. Out of this vortex flew Chief TeaZy, a Native American from an era long before the invention of the spear. Disoriented and confused, he picked himself up from the cobblestone ground, his eyes wide as he took in the foreign surroundings. Stone walls loomed high around him, and the people bustling through the courtyard wore strange, heavy clothing. As he walked through the kingdom, people stared at his unique attire, deerskin clothing and feathers in his hair, murmuring amongst themselves. TeaZy, driven by thirst, made his way to the river on the outskirts of the kingdom. As he knelt to drink, he heard a commotion nearby. 3 men were harassing a young woman, their intentions clearly nefarious. Without hesitation, TeaZy leaped into action. His movements were swift and precise, honed by a lifetime of survival and hunting. In mere moments, he had incapacitated the attackers, leaving them groaning on the ground. The young woman, tears in her eyes, thanked him profusely just as the royal guards arrived, led by the imposing Christoph. Christophe, misunderstanding the scene, was about to arrest TeaZy when the young woman intervened, explaining how the chief had saved her. Realizing his mistake, Christophe decided to take TeaZy to King Teazer, hoping the king would reward the mysterious stranger for his bravery. In the grand hall of the castle, Chief TeaZy met King Teazer, a wise and benevolent ruler. The king listened to Christophe's account and the young woman's testimony, then thanked Chief TeaZy for his valor. "You have my gratitude, stranger? But I must ask for one more favor. Our kingdom is at war with a nearby colony, and we are in dire need of a new strategy. Will you help us?" Chief TeaZy, understanding the language through a combination of gestures and simple words, nodded. He spent the next few days studying the kingdom's defenses and the enemy's tactics. Drawing from his own experiences and understanding of warfare, he devised a strategy that emphasized ambushes and psychological warfare, using the terrain to their advantage. King Teazer marveled at the plan. "Your strategy is brilliant. I promise we will find a way to return you to your home. Until then, you shall stay in the royal quarters as our honored guest." Meanwhile, in a vast desert covered in cacti, another portal opened, and out tumbled Caesar the fish. He landed in the middle of the Old West, surrounded by scorching sands and an endless expanse of cacti. Bewildered, Caesar wandered into a nearby town, his eyes wide with amazement at the sight of wooden buildings, horses tied to posts, and people in strange hats. Hungry and thirsty, Caesar found himself in front of a shop filled with fruits and other goods. Not understanding the concept of money or ownership, he began eating the fruit left outside. The shopkeeper rushed out, yelling and trying to stop him. But Caesar, agile and swift, dodged his attempts. The commotion attracted the attention of Sheriff Tz, a tall man with a stern demeanor. "You're under arrest," he shouted, but Caesar, not comprehending his words, continued to evade capture. Finally, the sheriff managed to corner him and, upon closer inspection, realized Caesar was genuinely confused and lost. After a long discussion, during which Sheriff Tz slowly pieced together Caesar's predicament, he decided to help the bewildered stranger. Over the next few weeks, the sheriff taught Caesar the ways of the Old West, including the basics of law and order. Caesar's natural agility and keen senses made him a quick learner, and soon he was deputized, becoming Sheriff Tz's most trusted aide. As Chief TeaZy and Caesar the fish adapted to their new environments, they each became invaluable assets to their respective communities. Chief TeaZy's strategies helped the medieval kingdom achieve victory in their war, and his wisdom earned him a place of honor beside King Teazer. Caesar's skills and honesty made him a respected deputy, bringing peace and justice to the town under Sheriff Tz's watchful eye. Though both men longed to return to their own time, they found purpose and camaraderie in their new worlds, their stories of courage and adaptation becoming legends passed down through generations.
Book 4, Ascension.
Tz and Franyth stood in the midst of crumbling buildings and shattered glass, holding each other tightly. They had just destroyed Dr. Rico's evil machine that had enslaved humanity for years. The remnants of the battle lay scattered around them, and people began to emerge from the wreckage, cheering their newfound freedom. However, as the jubilant sounds filled the air, everything suddenly froze. Time itself seemed to halt, leaving only Tz and Franyth able to move and speak. Bewildered, they looked around, trying to comprehend what had just happened. Then, from a radiant light above, a figure descended. She had an ethereal presence, with flowing robes and wings that shimmered like the dawn. "I am Christina, the Princess of Ascension," she declared, her voice resonating with an otherworldly melody. "One of the 4 princesses that protect and bring balance to the universe." Franyth, still holding Tz's hand, asked, "Why are you telling us this?" Christina smiled gently. "Your ancestors are locked in a battle within time itself for the survival of the human race. You two are the chosen ones who will bring everything to its rightful place in the universe." Tz's face hardened with the memory of their struggles. "I hate how things have turned out," he said bitterly. "I wish Dr. Rico had never invented that AI algorithm that took control of humanity." Christina's eyes softened with understanding. "Because you have saved the race from extinction, I can grant you this wish." With a graceful snap of her fingers, the destruction around them was erased. The city transformed into a vibrant, beautiful place where people walked the streets with smiles and laughter. As Tz and Franyth took in the miraculous change, something felt off. Dr. Rico was nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, inside a grand mansion somewhere in the city, a portal opened in a dimly lit room. Dr. Rico stepped out of his time machine, now twisted and mangled, his eyes widening in shock as he took in the unfamiliar scene. The city was beautiful, bustling with life and freedom, unlike the oppressive world he remembered. "What the hell is going on?" he muttered, checking the date on his device. It was indeed the year 3297. But nothing was as it should be. Rico hurried down to the basement, where his secret lab lay untouched. He needed to understand what had happened. In the lab, he began drawing on a whiteboard, frantically muttering to himself. The only way this could be. What is happening here? Back in the city, Tz and Franyth were also trying to make sense of their new reality. The people seemed happy, but the absence of Dr. Rico left a nagging feeling of unfinished business. They knew that if Rico had somehow escaped, he could still pose a threat. Christina reappeared before them, sensing their unease. "You have changed the course of history," she said. "But Dr. Rico's absence here suggests he has traveled to another point in time. You must be vigilant. How do we find him?" Tz asked, determination in his voice. Christina handed them a glowing amulet. "This is called a time egg. This will guide you through time. You must ensure that Rico does not disrupt the balance you have restored." Tz and Franyth nodded, accepting their new mission. They clasped hands, and with the amulet glowing brightly, they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Dr. Rico, meanwhile, scribbled furiously on the whiteboard, plotting his next move. "If this is 3297, he whispered to himself, then something, or someone, has altered the timeline. I must find out who and how and reclaim my control." The battle for the future was far from over. As Tz and Franyth embarked on their quest to ensure the safety of humanity, and Dr. Rico schemed in the shadows, the delicate balance of the universe hung in the balance. The fate of time itself rested in their hands.
Book 5. The Princess of Chaos.
In a small diner in the heart of 1950s America, Tz and his girlfriend, Lizzie, sat in a corner booth, enjoying a quiet meal. The jukebox played a gentle tune, and the clinking of cutlery and murmur of conversation filled the air. It was a peaceful evening, one of those rare moments of tranquility in their bustling lives. Suddenly, a bright light filled the diner, and a swirling portal opened right in front of their table. Out of it stepped two figures, Tz and Franyth, their faces etched with urgency and determination. The diner patrons gasped, dropping their forks and staring in shock. "We need to go now," Tz said, his voice firm but filled with an edge of desperation. "Dr. Rico is coming back in time from the year 3298 to kill you, Tz. You're a descendant of mine, and we made the wish that ended Rico's reign of terror in the future." Lizzie looked terrified, but Tz, sensing the gravity of the situation, nodded. "Let's go," he said, standing up and taking Lizzie's hand. Tz and Franyth led them out of the diner and into the night. They took Tz and Lizzie to a safe house on the outskirts of town, a place hidden from the prying eyes of anyone sent by Dr. Rico. For a few days they laid low, Tz and Franyth explaining the intricacies of time travel and the dangers they faced. Meanwhile, Dr. Rico, fuming with anger at his plans being thwarted, enlisted the help of Lil Chris, a notorious local thug. Rico equipped Chris with futuristic weapons, and gave him a simple directive: eliminate the target. Lil Chris tracked Tz down to a local band practice, a place Tz went to unwind and forget his troubles. As Tz walked home one evening, Chris emerged from the shadows brandishing a weapon that glowed with an eerie light. "You're coming with me," Chris snarled, aiming the device at Tz. Tz, though caught off guard, didn't panic. Just as Chris was about to pull the trigger, Tz and Franyth appeared, engaging in a fierce battle with the thug. The clash of weapons and flashes of light illuminated the dark alley. Tz fought valiantly, but Chris, armed with advanced technology and ruthless intent, managed to mortally wound him. As Tz lay dying on the cold pavement, he looked up at Franyth, his voice barely a whisper. "Franyth, I love." His words were cut short as his eyes closed for the last time. Franyth's heart shattered, but in that moment, Tz felt a strange clarity. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device given to him by Mikey, the man with the time machine who had once saved him in an alleyway. Without hesitation, Tz smashed the device on the ground. Time froze around them, and everything fell silent. An angelic figure appeared, her presence glowing with an ethereal light. It was Christina, the Princess of Ascension. She looked at Franyth with sorrowful eyes. "The object Tz just smashed is called a sacrificial hourglass. When broken, it sacrifices the user, but moves time back 24 hours for all the living. Only you can hear me because you are one of the 4 princesses, the Princess of Chaos. Your untapped power is beyond what all of us can do. Franyth, stunned by this revelation, asked, "Why don't you just snap your fingers and fix everything like last time?" Christina shook her head gently. "Because it's not my world to save, sister. It's yours." With that, time rewound, and everything reset to 24 hours prior. Lizzie back at home anticipating the next day's dinner, and Tz and Franyth still preparing to warn the two of the oncoming assault. Only Franyth remembered what had happened. But now Tz was nowhere to be found. Franyth's heart ached with the loss. She knew they wouldn't find him. But she understood the weight of her responsibility. She vowed to protect the world from Dr. Rico's machinations, using her newfound power as the Princess of Chaos. If she could only figure them out, the memory of Tzy's sacrifice would guide her, giving her the strength to face whatever challenges lay ahead. But there was one thing she didn't understand. If Dr. Rico wanted to kill Tz, wasn't his mission complete? It didn't make sense. Maybe Tz wasn't who he was after, she thought. Then who? She fell asleep with this thought in mind.